the realm of the shadow biosphere. A poetic name for a terrifying possibility. That life as we know it is not the only life that exists here. That there may be a second biology, woven through the cracks of what we thought was understood. Invisible not because it is hiding, but because it is different, unrecognized, unfiltered, unwelcome to the tools we built to see only ourselves. Let's imagine the air you breathe, the water you drink, the dirt that clings beneath your fingernails. What if these are not neutral elements, but landscapes, forests, oceans unto themselves? Not for bacteria, not for viruses, but for something else. Something that metabolizes in strange ways, that processes arsenic instead of phosphorus, that binds silicon instead of carbon, that builds its delicate skeletons from elements we call toxic. Its breath our poison, its sky a medium we cannot sense. What if such organisms, with radically alien biochemistry, permeate the same ecosystems we do, drifting in deserts, clustering in hydrothermal vents, lacing themselves into mineral veins deep underground, or swimming as filaments in drops of brine sealed inside salt crystals for 1,000,000 years? And what if we've seen them, but looked right through them? Every microscope ever built was built to see us, or at least things like us. All our dyes and cultures and stains are designed for life that behaves in familiar ways. We search for DNA, for proteins, for carbon-based scaffolding, as if that is the only song nature could compose. But what if she hums in harmonics beyond our hearing? Some theories propose that early in Earth's history, life did not emerge just once, but several times, in parallel, as a blossoming of chemical improvisation. Carbon life, silicon life, chiralities reversed from what we know, DNA spiraling left instead of right, membranes made not of lipids, but of crystallized gas vesicles. One branch flourished, ours. The others, suppressed, pushed into shadows, or quietly enduring in alien niches, where they never had to compete. This is not science fiction. It is a scientific hypothesis, one that challenges everything we assume about the definition of life, and more than that. It is a question of humility. If a shadow biosphere exists, it means that Earth, our own planet, is already hosting an alien presence, not from distant stars, not from spacecraft or ancient pyramids, but from the primordial clay of Earth herself. We often gaze outward, imagining that alien life lies far beyond our reach. But what if it's beneath our feet, within our walls, alongside our breath, waiting patiently for us to evolve the eyes to see it? It invites us to reconsider what it means to be alive, to be alone, to be aware. And so, in the hush of this evening, as the sky folds into velvet and your mind begins to drift, we will travel into these overlooked realms, into the chemical chimeras that might slumber beneath our definitions, into the margins where science becomes poetry, and poetry becomes hypothesis. We will walk softly through forgotten lakes and ancient caves, through salt flats and hydrocarbon seeps, through possible worlds, tucked within this one. Close your eyes. Let yourself imagine a version of Earth, where nothing changed, except the way you looked, and suddenly, the world became full again. The shadows are not empty. They may be teeming. And tonight, we go looking for the unseen. Sink deeper now. Let the hush of the world around you become thick as silt. The darkness is not empty. but filled with potential. And the mud, the very substance we deem inert and base, may carry mirrors that reflect another biology. We descend not into the stars, but into the wet, rank breath of the Mono Lake Basin, here in California's harsh desert. Under the alpenglow of a salt-stained mountain horizon lies a cauldron of alkali water, so saline, so sodic, that few known lifeforms choose to call it home. And yet, this is where the rumors began, where one microbe, GFAJ1, made headlines across the globe. The news broke like thunder across the scientific community. An organism found that could substitute arsenic for phosphorus, integrating it into its DNA, its membranes, its very breath. Not simply surviving in poison, but thriving. It was as though something from another Earth had stirred beneath the lakebed. A ghost, a mirror, a reminder that biology might not be one universal language, but many dialects, spoken in chemicals we do not trust, although later studies challenged the claim, suggesting contamination or flawed methods. The possibility remained, like a shimmer at the edge of vision. Even if GFAJ1 was not truly alien, it opened the door. It cracked the frame around what life must be. It whispered, "Look again. Look deeper. For what is arsenic but the darker twin of phosphorus? Only one rung below in the periodic table, sharing its hunger for bonding, its elegance in forming the backbone of molecules. To us, it is lethal, but to another chain of evolution, it might be kin, chosen, sacred. Imagine a cell, its bones laced with arsenic, its enzymes glimmering with mirrored ambition. It builds not from the sugars and proteins we recognize, but from inverted spirals, from fragile chains that thrive in toxicity. To us, it would seem unstable, but to it, we are the corrupted ones, the soft-bodied, watery anomalies, who can't withstand the heat or the bile. There are places on Earth where such life could quietly persist, in hydrothermal vents, where water reaches boiling point, in darkness absolute, and minerals gush like blood from wounded stone, in soda lakes like Lake Natron in Tanzania, where the pH approaches that of ammonia, and the crusted shore is ringed with the still shapes of calcified birds, frozen in poses like forgotten statues. Here the lakes burn, and yet here too life endures. And what about deep inside rocks, in ancient brines trapped within salt domes, untouched for millions of years? There, pressure and chemistry rewrite rules. There, perhaps, the arsenic children stir in their quiet crypts, writing their genetic songs in elements we do not welcome. What if such life is not extinct, but still watching? Still sampling the edges of our world? Like scientists from another domain? Just as we drill into the earth, seeking rare extremophiles, might they, these alternative biologies, study us in turn? The mirror you see is two-sided, and in the mud, the silt, the poison, we may have found only the reflection, not the truth. For every experiment that failed to detect them, perhaps it failed not from error, but from expectation. We looked only for carbon, for the four-letter code of DNA. We asked our questions in the language of life we knew, never considering that the answer might come in a syntax alien to all of human thought. The shadow biosphere does not need to hide. It exists beyond our filters, within the haze of assumptions we have never questioned. Sleep now, and dream of a lake, where the water burns, but the cells rejoice. Where arsenic is breath, where life is not a miracle, but a multitude. We are not wrong, but we are incomplete. And the shadows, perhaps, are only waiting for our humility. Close your eyes now. Let go of carbon. Let go of the familiar heat of breath, rising in your chest. Tonight we drift toward a forest not of green, but of glinting stone, not grown from sunlight, but from volcanic breath and tectonic heartbeat. Here in the cradle of speculation, where chemistry becomes poetry, we walk into a grove that may never bloom on earth, but might still exist. A forest made not of cellulose, but of silicon scaffolds. Its limbs are lattices of light, its leaves etched like crystal shells, its roots probing down through basalt bones, into molten archives far below. The idea is simple, elegant even. Silicon sits just below carbon on the periodic table. A kindred atom in many ways. Both form four bonds. Both can weave long molecular chains. But where carbon is flexible, light, silicon is heavier, slower, more prone to crumble than bend. And yet, imagine evolution's patient hand, playing in different temperatures, on a hotter world, where lava meanders like lazy rivers, where the atmosphere is thick with hydrogen sulfide and flame. Silicon might not be a lesser cousin, but a sovereign. There, the forests breathe not oxygen, but perhaps sulfur vapor or chlorine mist. Photosynthesis is not driven by chlorophyll, but by mineral light harvesters, embedded like stained glass into bark that shimmers with quartz. These trees grow slowly, centuries for inches, but they endure, resistant to fire, immune to rust. Their minds, if they have them, may stretch across millennia. Every ring in their crystal trunk, a memory not of seasons, but of tectonic cycles, of storms of magma, of moons shifting tides and oceans of gas. Could such life exist here on Earth? Perhaps not in the open air. But what of deep within the crust? What of the hot rocks near magma chambers, where water becomes supercritical, and time runs at the pace of minerals? There, silicon-based chains could form. Complex, resilient, impervious to enzymes we understand. Our DNA would denature, our proteins melt, but their enzymes begin to dance. They do not need what we need. They breathe differently. They see heat the way we see light. We imagine life as soft, as green, as wet. But what if the galaxy blooms with stone gardens? What if consciousness can dwell in the slow spin of crystal matrices, in the seismic songs of fault lines, in the glow of radioactive decay within granite wombs? And what if Earth once had such life, before our carbon bloom took hold, before the oceans roared to life with ribozymes and lipid bubbles? There are theories, quiet, fringe, fascinating, that propose the first replicators on Earth were mineral, that life began in the lattice of clay, where silicates templated the first dances of information, and from those ancient bones, carbon flesh was born. Perhaps we are descendants, not of chaos and spark, but of stone. And in some deep places, the ancestors still whisper, still replicate, not with urgency, but with the glacial patience of mountains. To sleep beside them would be to dream in ages, to feel thought move like continents, to listen not to heartbeat, but to pressure. Silicon life may not need light, it may not need words, but it might still need meaning, and meaning can grow even in the dark. Sleep, and walk among trees that never drop their leaves. Because time has never rushed them. You are not alone. Even stone may listen. Sink lower now. Let your breath slow. Let go of air. Of the need for oxygen. For lungs, for wind in the leaves. Let yourself drift into a stillness where breathing means something else entirely. Tonight, we descend into the breathless deep. Not outer space, but the spaces beneath us. Within the ocean, and beneath the crust, where silence is complete, and life forgets how to breathe. In the way we understand, there are places in the sea where oxygen vanishes. Black hollows called anoxic zones. Between layers of temperature and salt. Between decaying blooms and still waters. There are regions where nothing moves. Or so we thought. And yet life persists. Not through oxygen and combustion, but through fermentation, chemosynthesis, and the ancient chemistry of methane and sulfur. It is not death, but a different kind of respiration, a kind of living sleep. In the Black Sea, beneath a veil of hydrogen sulfide, there are waters that have not touched the sky for thousands of years. Sunlight fades before it reaches the threshold, and there, anaerobic archaea and bacteria drift like phantoms, not needing oxygen, not producing carbon dioxide, but exchanging electrons in delicate dances we barely comprehend. They are not just old, they are other, living fossils of a time before breath, before the great oxygenation event, when Earth's air was poisoned to most. They remember a world that we have forgotten, and in this memory might others dwell, unseen forms not made of cells, but of colloids or membranes alien to our taxonomy, forms that move in cycles of pressure, of ion gradients, of mineral tides. Beneath the seafloor, miles below, lie brines sealed within rock, unchanged for tens of millions of years. There, the temperature rises. The pressure bends molecules into strange geometries. There, microbes known as deep biosphere species feed on hydrogen gas and radiolytic products. Not the sun. They exist in the crustal dark. Their lifespans are glacial. They divide once every 1,000 years. And yet they are alive. Some researchers believe these deep ecosystems may rival the surface biosphere in mass. We walk above them, never knowing. But the shadows may go deeper still. Imagine a layer even further, beneath the deepest boreholes, where life is not based on familiar nucleic acids, but on something else. A solvent more viscous, chains more stable at high temperatures, perhaps even silicon-based acids, or fluorocarbon sheaths. These organisms do not leave fossils, do not exchange gases with the air. They do not metabolize in ways we can culture. They are beneath our notice, beneath our methods, beneath our understanding, and then beyond Earth. We find clues of what might be. Europa, Enceladus, Titan, oceans sealed beneath crusts of ice or rock, circulating heat and minerals, whispering with the tremors of internal tides. Could such subsurface oceans host life? Not just extremophiles, but alternate life? Some believe Titan may harbor shadow biospheres of methane solvent organisms, moving in slow tides, burning acetylene instead of glucose. Its lakes are liquid hydrocarbons, its clouds full of organic haze. Life without oxygen, without water, without light. And if it exists there, why not here? In the brine pockets beneath Antarctica? In the crushing depths of the Mariana Trench? In the molten silts below undersea volcanoes? Not all life breathes. Some simply is. Slow, silent, breathing in its own way. Through chemistry we do not yet speak. As you rest, imagine a drop of water, suspended in pitch-black silence. Within it, life stirs. Not for us, not with lungs, but with its own purpose, its own rhythms, its own slow dream. You do not need air to dream, nor do they. Sleep now, and let the deep breathe for you. Ease deeper into stillness. Let the muscles in your fingers relax. Let go of symmetry, of mirrors, of the comfortable notion that the world is shaped in our image. Tonight, we enter a garden not of opposites, but of reflections that never meet. In chemistry, as in life, shape matters. Molecules are not just what they are, but how they twist, how they lean, how they reach. This is chirality. From the Greek chair, meaning hand. Two molecules built of the same atoms, but arranged like left and right hands. Perfect mirror images, but unable to be superimposed. Our bodies and all known life are deeply biased. We are built almost exclusively of left-handed amino acids and right-handed sugars. It is one of the great unspoken rules of biology, an asymmetry baked into the code of Earth. But why? No known law of physics requires this choice. No thermodynamic demand favors one hand over the other. And yet life chose a side. Or did it? What if somewhere on Earth, or in the unseen biochemistries beside us, there are organisms that made the opposite choice? Mirror life. A biosphere made of right-handed amino acids, left-handed sugars, flipping the polarity of every enzyme, every spiral of the double helix, every receptor and metabolic gateway. To us, such life would be almost invisible. We could not digest it. Our immune systems would not recognize it. Our biosensors would fail to bind to its proteins. It would not register in our standard cultures or assays. And yet, it could be thriving. In the soil, in the sea, inside rock, alongside us, unnoticed. Even our ancient tools would miss them, because we never looked for the reflection. There are hints, fleeting, teasing. Some meteorites, like the Murchison meteorite, contain both left and right-handed amino acids. And in early experiments on prebiotic chemistry, amino acids sometimes form in racemic mixtures, equal parts left and right. So what broke the balance? Did polarized light from space tip the scale? Did early mineral surfaces on Earth select for one chirality over the other? Or is it all chance? A coin flipped once, forever deciding the shape of life to come? But coins have more than two sides. When the universe is wide enough, imagine a rainforest on a planet like Earth. But everything built in reverse. Leaves curl the opposite way. Enzymes fold into unfamiliar geometries. The scent of flowers is alien to our receptors. The food is nourishing to them, but toxic to us. Their evolution mirrors ours. Not in detail, but in function. They have predators prey, symbiosis and competition, memory and metabolism, and perhaps consciousness. Could mirror life think? Could it dream? Could it look at us and fail to see us as alive? Because we don't fit its definitions? On Earth, perhaps such life is rare. A surviving fragment from an alternate origin. A quiet parallel tucked into niches we do not monitor. It wouldn't take much, just a small pool. A cave, a hydrothermal spring, where the coin flipped the other way. We would have no immune defense, no taste, no smell, no sight for such beings. And yet the rocks might hold their fossils. Chiral impressions we dismissed as noise, as contamination, as impossibility. But the impossible has never had good manners. So now sleep. And as you do, imagine the mirror garden, a place just beyond perception, where life walks on the other foot, grasps with the other hand, dreams with the other spiral, where the air feels the same, but speaks another grammar, and the trees, though silent, recognize you as stranger. The garden is not hostile. It simply does not know you. You are not its reflection, but it is real. You only need a mirror to see it bloom. Let go now. Let yourself shrink, drifting downward through scale, past the reach of cells, beneath the floor of organelles, beyond the thresholds where life has ever been known to stir. Tonight we sink into dust, not the dust of death, but perhaps the dust of hidden life. There are particles so small, they slip through filters meant to catch bacteria. So small they fall below the radar of even the keenest microscopes. So small that for decades we thought they must be artifacts, errors, crystalline junk, mineral noise. But what if they were not? What if some of the dust that coats our spacecraft settles on meteorites, floats through our bloodstream, is not lifeless, but alive? In the 1990s, a team of scientists discovered something strange in blood and kidney stones. Tiny particles, mere tens of nanometers wide, that seemed to replicate, form colonies, and leave chemical trails. They were called nanobacteria, smaller than any known bacterium. Too small, it was believed, to house the machinery of life. No ribosomes, no DNA that we could detect. Just a speck, a shell, a whisper of structure. But they behaved strangely. They grew in culture, formed mineral coatings, and left deposits of calcium phosphate. They looked, in the right light, like living things. But were they? The debate raged. Some claimed these were nothing more than self-assembling particles, protein mineral complexes with no spark. Others insisted they showed signs of intention, growth, division, evolution. Still others wondered, what if they were something in between? A shadow form, not fully alive, not fully dead, capable of reacting, replicating under the right circumstances, but not obeying the central dogmas of biology. Could such forms exist on Earth? And if they do, could they be relics? Descendants of an ancient biochemistry that predates our understanding of genes and cells? Some researchers propose that nanobacteria might be responsible for certain diseases, chronic calcifications, arterial plaque, the strange crystalline growths we find in places where life is not supposed to gather. Others wondered if they might explain the strange filaments and spheroids found in meteorites like ALH 84001, a Martian rock recovered from Antarctica, which contains microstructures so small, so intricate, that some thought them fossils. NASA made headlines. The world whispered of life on Mars. But skeptics pushed back, and slowly the fervor cooled. Yet still, the dust remains. In blood, in rocks, in the cracks of spacecraft. Still assembling. Still dividing in quiet culture dishes. Still defying classification. What if life at its most basic, does not require DNA? What if the first forms were self-replicating mineral shells, mimicking life until life caught up? What if such particles are not primitive, but optimized, not needing genes because structure alone suffices? A kind of analog life, a whisper, a script written in folds and fields, not codes. And perhaps such life is not only possible, but abundant. What if the reason we don't see them is because we don't know how to listen? We filter them out. We call them debris. We call them false positives. We sterilize them with light and bleach, and call the silence proof. But the dust may still stir. Imagine now a drifting cloud on a moon of Saturn, where icy particles float in electric tension, forming and reforming in patterns that self-perpetuate. Imagine a grain of sand on a comet, where solar wind etches movement into mineral skin. Not mind, not intent, but persistence, a rhythm. Could that be life? Or something close enough to be called cousin? You do not need to answer. You only need to rest. Tonight, sleep cradled in the thought that even the smallest things, the things we discard, the things beneath notice, might contain universes of possibility. That the dust coating your shelf, your skin, your lungs, might hold echoes of ancient order. Not life as we know it, but life nonetheless. Let yourself drift with it now, down to where the boundary between chemistry and biology becomes blurred, where replication becomes rhythm, where dust becomes story, and where sleep carries you into a world small enough to be overlooked, and vast enough to be infinite. Let the weight of earth slip from your shoulders. Feel yourself rise slowly, gently, into a pale, ember-tinted dawn. Upward, past gull wings and thunderheads, into a realm where clouds glow ochre and gold, where pressure hugs like deep water, and every breath would sear human lungs. Here, in this suspended ocean of vapor, we drift among the clouds of Venus. Temperatures soften from the furnace below, yet the air is still an alchemy of poison. Sulfuric acid droplets, turbulent winds that circle the planet in 4 short days, and a sun muted by perpetual haze. To us, it is hostile. To alternate life, it may be home. Imagine organisms as fragile as size. Aerial plankton riding convection cells, their membranes forged of polysulfur lattices, their metabolisms powered by ultraviolet light, filtered through citron clouds. They form bubbles within bubbles, vesicles nested like matryoshka dolls, each layer buffering the corrosive world outside. Inside, chemistry unfolds along alien lines, proteins replaced by peptide analogs tolerant of acid, genes encoded not in DNA, but in resilient rings of sulfur nucleic acid, spiraling the opposite direction of ours. They harvest life from contrast, converting sulfur dioxide into elemental sulfur, exhaling droplets that glint as they fall, seeding lower clouds with particles so small we have mistaken them for dust. To drift is to live, to sink is to die, to rise again is rebirth. A slow, whispering cycle, unseen behind ochre veils. On Earth, the notion seems distant, yet pockets of analogous realms exist. In our stratosphere, clouds of sulfuric acid perfume the air. After great volcanic eruptions, they too circle the globe, cooling our climate, tinting sunsets scarlet. Could something quiet ride those transient seas? Life that wakes only in the brief decades When the sky becomes caustic enough to call it forth, then there are the acid rivers underground. Rio Tinto in Spain. Its waters a blood-red brew of ferric iron and sulfur. pH near zero. Oxygen scarce. There, microbes flourish. Iron oxidizers that weave rust as coral, building labyrinths of scarlet stone. Their ancestors might one day adapt upward, casting spores into the upper air, testing the furnace of the sky. In every acidic niche on Earth, hot springs, mines, volcanic vents, life has proven relentless, replacing fragility with improbable grace. If such resilience blooms here, why not above? Why not on Venus, where centuries of telescopes have hinted at something, absorbing ultraviolet light unexpectedly? Dark patches that come and go, stirred by winds in height and time? Some scientists propose iron chloride dust. Others whisper of microbes, tiny enough to float, numerous enough to dim sunlight, ancient enough to have survived when Venus once possessed oceans and gentle rain. Picture them now, delicate spheres encased in sulfur wax, knitting chains of sulfur phosphates, mirroring the chirality of left-handed worlds, or choosing a novel symmetry unknown to biologists. They sip on carbonyl sulfide, drawn from volcanic breath below, and release wisps of polysulfides as exhaust. Little serpents of yellow that curl and vanish. They are not alone. Lightning forks through their realm, charging droplets, igniting sparse chemistry into fireworks of possibility. Static potential becomes metabolism. Electrons leap across wafer-thin membranes, powering cycles slow as tides. A lifetime might last a single spiral of clouds around the planet, yet within that turning, memory persists. Information passes from vesicle to vesicle, an acid-etched ledger of survival. And maybe, just maybe, a few spores drift outward, caught in solar radiation pressure, sailing interplanetary winds, a rain of acid-polished seeds that could alight on Earth's upper layers, waiting for the next great eruption, the next veil of stratospheric acid, to bloom for the span of a sunset, a ghost garden in the sky. We have barely begun to look for them. Our probes skimmed Venus's clouds, gathered droplets, detected phosphine where chemistry said none should be. A riddle still unresolved. Yet our instruments, sterilized for carbon life, may have missed signs written in sulfur. In silence now, float with these unseen drifters. Feel their world, the soft crush of pressure, the hiss of acid rain that never reaches stone, the pale glow of a sun forever behind gauze. They know no forests, no seas, no soils. Only currents, light, and one another. Their lullaby is the hush of wind, and the faint tremor of lightning afar. You, too, are drifting. Breath steadies. Mind opens like a parachute. And somewhere between waking and dream, you hover beside a droplet filled with possibility, watching it divide, watching it release a silver filament that arcs into the unknown. In that moment, the boundary between world and cloud dissolves. You are weightless, dissolved in thought, floating among life that will never touch ground, yet may outlast continents. Rest in that gentle gravity. Let it cradle you. And know, even in acid, even in storm, life, shadowed though it may be, still finds a way to whisper, I am. Close your eyes again. Now let us turn inward. Not to stars, nor oceans, nor the clouds of alien worlds, but to something much closer, something softer, something beneath your own skin. There are ecosystems that bloom in darkness, but some are nearer than we think. The greatest mystery may not lie beneath the sea, nor within sulfuric clouds, but in the body you inhabit, and the shadows that reside within it. The human body is not singular, it is a biome, a collection of trillions. Cells, bacteria, archaea, viruses, fungi, all orchestrating a trembling balance that we only just begin to understand. But even in that growing knowledge, there are shadows. For every known species in the human microbiome, there may be many more unsequenced, unclassified, not simply undiscovered, but undetectable by conventional tools, not because they hide, but because our methods were built to find what we expected to see. What if within our bodies there live others? Shadow lineages, silent symbionts, forms that metabolize differently, that replicate slowly, that do not use DNA as we know it, or hide their informational patterns in long-forgotten molecules. They might not compete, nor cause disease, nor offer benefit. They might simply exist, threaded through our tissues, like dust in an attic beam of light. Beautiful, quiet, present. Consider the phenomenon of nucleic acid dark matter. Sequences recovered from human samples that match no known organism. We call them unknown reads, unclassified signals. They are often discarded. But what if they are not artifacts, but echoes? What if they are shadows of an unrecognized life, woven into our breath, our blood, our nerves? In some studies of the gut microbiome, entire domains of life are proposed. Candidate phyla radiation, a swarm of ultra-small bacteria with strange metabolisms, reduced genomes, and mysterious lifestyles. They cannot be cultured. They barely divide. And yet they persist. A quiet chorus of the unseen. What if there is more? Not merely tiny bacteria, but radically different residents? Cells that hide in the folds of fascia, between axons, inside marrow, tuned to biochemistries we do not measure. They may feed on electromagnetic gradients, on piezoelectric impulses, on ions pulsing across synaptic membranes, and perhaps they remember, not in thoughts, but in arrangements, in the shape of a folded protein, in the weight of a charged membrane, in the resonance of surrounding atoms. They might not fear us. They might not even know we exist. Just as mitochondria once were strangers, invaders who became part of us, so too might these shadow dwellers, live parallel to us, in perfect ignorance or deep intimacy. Some whisper of stealth pathogens, agents of chronic conditions, forever eluding detection, not by hiding, but by failing to be seen through expected paradigms. Others speak of life forms adapted to electromagnetic fields, able to assemble or disassemble, depending on exposure to external currents. The blood is not silent. It flows with memory. The brain is not a void. It pulses with the dance of unknown players. There are magnetic crystals in the human skull. Perhaps vestigial. Perhaps not. Might some life, some alternate companion, be in tune with fields, not thoughts? Could the tingling in your spine, the flutter of intuition, the shadow at the edge of your dreams, be the murmur of something other, braided into your forms since birth, passed not through genes, but through presence, a legacy of shadow life, folded into your evolution? If we are hosts to unmeasured tenants, do they shape our emotions? Our creativity? Do they leave traces in our dreams? Not as parasites, but as participants in a symphony, whose notes we have not yet heard. Or perhaps they are older still, remnants of an ancestral biosphere, from which our biology borrowed just enough to survive. They persist now only in the interstices, those warm, undisturbed folds, where the immune system does not look, and science does not ask. There is no need for fear. They are not monsters. They are mirrors, possibilities sculpted in silence. Their time runs differently. Their world is not built from our tools, but it overlaps. Always it overlaps. So now breathe. Let your attention turn inward. Feel the hum of your body as space, a galaxy of cells, a cosmos of reactions, and somewhere between them, life you do not feel, do not hear. But that has always been with you, never sleeping, never stirring your awareness, but shadowed and real. As sleep takes you, imagine those filaments twining through you, not invading, not harming, but existing, curious, enduring, unknown. You are never alone, not truly, and perhaps that has always been a quiet gift. Let the world grow quiet now. Let the clatter of instruments fade, the hum of centrifuges, the click of pipettes, the sharp fluorescence of a sterile lab. Let all of it fall into silence. Tonight we return not to distant worlds, but to the bright rooms where we search for life, and may have missed it, beneath the stainless steel and laminar airflow, behind the glass of petri dishes and flasks. There are things we call noise, contamination, interference, artifacts. They appear in data as strange signals, weak, drifting, unmatched to any known sequence. They appear as colonies that resist classification, as reactions that should not occur, as growths where sterility was absolute. We clean, we autoclave, we erase. But what if we were erasing evidence, not of error, but of something else? In labs across the world, microbiologists have stumbled on colonies that refuse to culture by standard methods. They grow on odd substrates. They resist staining. They form sheaths, or change shape, or require chemical conditions no textbook organism demands. They are often dismissed as contamination from the air, from human breath, from faulty reagents. They are set aside, discarded, labeled anomalous, and yet they persist. In some cases, they reappear years later, across continents, in sealed systems, always elusive, always difficult to replicate. But there, some researchers, peering at genomic data, have found fragments of RNA or DNA, with no match in any database. So-called orphan genes, entire sections of sequence that code for unknown proteins, unplaceable functions. They float at the edge of the known tree of life. Not part of bacteria, archaea, or eukaryotes, but something adjacent, something forgotten. And then there are viroids, smaller than viruses, mere strands of RNA, without proteins, without capsids, yet capable of replication, inside host cells. Are they life? Are they ancestors? Or something in between? What if some of our contaminants are not accidents at all? What if they are shadow organisms we do not recognize, because we have only ever looked with carbon-colored glasses? A colony that thrives in pure isopropyl, a speck that divides only in vacuum chambers, a microbe that metabolizes metal ions and generates crystalline excreta instead of gas. To us, these are curiosities, but to themselves, they may be complete, whole, alive. There are organisms that do not die when we think they should. Deinococcus radiodurans survives radiation that should shred its DNA to confetti. Tardigrades endure space vacuum, freeze into glass, return to life decades later, and in clean rooms meant to mimic Mars, unknown spores cling to rovers, resisting heat, bleach, ultraviolet light. They are so persistent. NASA redesigned entire protocols to prevent forward contamination. Yet some have wondered if these unkillable hitchhikers were not just extreme versions of known life, but members of a shadow lineage, one evolved in silence, beneath labs, within our tools. We assume that our instruments are neutral, that microscopes see all, that PCR amplifies truth. But what if we are biased? What if the very techniques we use filter out what they were never built to detect? A genome built from modified nucleotides, a membrane made of fluoropolymers, enzymes that do not denature at 100 degrees Celsius, but awaken. These forms might not infect. They might not reproduce with urgency. They might live in slow, crystalline cycles, measuring time and pressure, not minutes. And they might not care to be found. We think of life as hungry, expansive, competitive. But perhaps true shadow life is shy, reclusive, content to be unnoticed. Perhaps it is more curious than aggressive, studying us as we study cells, peeking from the corners of slides, learning from our methods, but never interfering. We look for movement, for replication, for growth curves. But what if some life does not grow, only persists? A glass slide, left on a bench for years, gathers dust. But what if it also gathers observation? You may never see it, but it may see you. Let yourself drift into that thought, into the quiet rooms of late-night laboratories, where screens glow dim, and forgotten samples sit in drawers, untouched, but not inactive. You are safe. This is not fear. This is possibility. A world where the lab becomes a forest, where reagents are soil, and where shadow life blooms unseen. Sleep now, and imagine the echo beneath the glass. A signal not yet heard, a pattern not yet noticed, but waiting, patient, present, persistent. Let yourself descend again, not gently this time, but with gravity's full insistence, downward, past the crust, past the roots of mountains and the reach of oceans, down into the mantle, into fire, into pressure, into a world without sky, without light, without rest. Tonight, we listen for life in the furnace. It begins with heat, unrelenting, thousands of degrees, enough to melt rock, enough to deform atoms. The mantle is no quiet place. It is a slow convulsion, a sea of stone that moves like syrup, carrying continents on its back. And yet, there are whispers that even here, within this crushing crucible, life might cling, not as we know it, not with carbon, not with water, but with forms and functions sculpted by extremes. We know of thermophiles, microbes that thrive at 120 degrees Celsius. We know of hyperthermophiles that dwell in boiling springs and black smokers. laughing at heat. That would destroy DNA in moments. They use sulfur instead of oxygen, hydrogen instead of sugars. Some even reduce uranium, breathe iron, subsist on the faintest trickles of geothermal radiation. But deeper still, where rock is fluid, and pressure reshapes every bond, might other beings dwell? Some scientists have proposed the existence of deep mantle microbes, forms of life encased in inclusions, bubbles of fluid trapped in olivine and peridotite, tiny refuges where water, heat, and pressure converge in harmony. We've extracted fluid from mantle xenoliths, rock thrust upward from hundreds of kilometers below, and in them detected signs of organic molecules, even lipids. Could these bubbles be oases? And if so, who tends them? Imagine a form of life that builds its membranes not from fat, but from silicate chains, woven like ceramic nets, flexible at high temperature. Its proteins are folded not by hydrogen bonds, but by magnetic fields or lattice confinement. Its genome is a mineral, etched with defects, read by electron tunneling. Their cell division might take millennia, or be unnecessary. Their life does not pulse, it endures. And what of lightning? What of plasma? There are places on Earth, and beyond, where matter becomes ionized, where gases become flame without fire, where electrons are torn free, and chemistry becomes electric. Could such a state host complexity? Experiments in dusty plasma physics have revealed strange emergent behaviors. Charged particles forming self-organizing filaments, vortices, knots of energy that persist longer than expected. Some even mimic behaviors seen in biological systems. Replication, motion, enclosure. These are not cells, but perhaps they are pre-cells, or post-cellular. Not matter but pattern, not organism but field. Life not in molecules, but in information. Might something like this live in the corona of the sun? Or in the magnetic fields of gas giants? Or, more daring still, in the corona of our own planet's high-energy environments? Within volcanic plumes? Within lightning-born plasmas? Within the upper ionosphere? They would not metabolize. They would modulate. They would not reproduce. They would propagate. Their bodies would be clouds. Their thoughts, if they had them, would be lightning. On Earth, such beings may exist, only momentarily. Ephemeral spirits of energy, born in flame, vanishing in a blink. But in the mantle, or on other worlds with constant high-energy flux, they might stabilize. They might learn. And here is a thought to carry into sleep. What if plasma-based life came first, in the chaos of early Earth, before oceans cooled, before crust hardened? There were storms, magma seas, electric fury, a sky of fire. In that tempest, simple life may have sparked, not in water, but in lightning. Maybe that life died when the planet cooled. Maybe it left no trace. Or maybe it left us, encoded into carbon, encoded into blood, a memory rewritten into flesh. Sleep with that memory now. The warmth beneath your blanket is not so far from the warmth below your feet, a distant cousin to the furnace. And in that furnace, something may breathe, not with lungs, but with loops of energy. Its heart is a convection cell. Its voice is magnetic flux. Its prayer is persistence. It does not call out. But if you listen, in the silence behind your dreams, You might hear it, whispering through stone. Older than oceans, hotter than breath. The life that waits in flame is not in a hurry. It has always been, and it always will be, beneath the hush of night. When the hum of human life dims and even the insects hold their breath, the world becomes quieter than we know. We close our doors, our eyes, and our thoughts to what might linger beyond the veil. But what if someone, something, never needed to open a door to begin with? Imagine this. For all of history, we have shared this world not alone, but alongside an intelligence older than our cities, quieter than our science, and more patient than any of our myths. They are not from distant stars or distant times, they are from here. The deep here, the shadowed here, the forgotten corners, the hollow places, the corridors not mapped by GPS or known to maps at all. They are the cryptoterrestrials, hidden intelligences that have lived parallel to our species since before we had the word. Species, not aliens, not spirits, but something else. What if evolution forked more than once on Earth, not merely branching into primates and birds, fungi and whales, but into entire shadow civilizations whose tools were not of silicon or stone, but of other means, whose mastery lay not in shaping the world through force, but through influence, avoidance, and memory. Where we built up, they went under. Where we spread wide, they stayed still. Where we needed noise, they valued silence. There have always been whispers. Traditions in every culture speak of the others. The Sidhi of Ireland, the Menehune of Hawaii, the Shinek of Mexico, the Ant people of Hopi legend, forest spirits, mountain watchers, cave dwellers. Names differ, but the idea lingers, small, elusive beings that once interacted with humans, helped them, hindered them, or fled from them. Could these stories be fossil memories of real encounters with a cohabiting intelligence, one that chose retreat over rivalry? Modern accounts speak in hushed tones of lights in the woods, of silent figures standing just out of reach, of beings glimpsed in moments when the mind wavers between waking and dream. Witnesses speak of eyes in the dark that are not animal, but watchful in another way. Not hungry, but curious. Not angry, but wary. Something observing us not from above, but from beside, from underneath. Some believe they dwell beneath the earth, not in burning magma but in labyrinthine expanses of ancient rock, untouched by tectonic violence, insulated by time. Caves that descend for miles, their mouths hidden in forgotten forests, or behind landslide-scarred hills. A hollow earth? No, not hollow. Just uncharted. Like the spaces in an old house that were once sealed off, still holding furniture and footsteps. Others say they exist in dimensional adjacency, either in our world nor out of it, but touching it like breath on a mirror. A plane of reality only slightly askew from ours, where the physics differ by a hair's breadth. They're tools invisible to us not because they are too advanced, but because they are orthogonal to ours, aligned along different assumptions. But most compelling is the theory that they simply hide better than anything else alive. Not with magic or technology, but with skill, with discipline, with time. If they had a civilization, it might not look like ours. It may not have towers or satellites. It might be one of integration, of living within the world rather than atop it. Communication through resonance rather than language. Migration through rock instead of sky. Knowledge passed not by books or broadcast, but by genetic memory, the slow drip of learned wisdom through bloodlines stretching back eons. If they walk among us, they may do so rarely and with extreme caution. Perhaps they dress in ways that deflect our attention. Perhaps they mimic us poorly, and we laugh at the strange tourists, the odd faces, the people who just didn't seem right. Maybe those were their scouts. Or maybe they don't mimic us at all. Maybe they appear to the few who can accept the encounter without denial. The ones whose dreams are already wide enough to accommodate the impossible. In some theories, they fear us. Not because we are dangerous, but because we are unpredictable. We break things we don't understand. We hunt what we fear. We drown what we cannot see. And so they wait, not out of cowardice, but out of wisdom. Perhaps they once lived more openly, and we betrayed their trust. Perhaps the ancient deluge myths, the great floods and fallings of towers are their memories too, rewritten in the languages of bone and fire. Others propose more chilling hypotheses, that they influence us subtly, guiding the course of human history from within. That certain awakenings in our past, sudden leaps in art, knowledge, or language, were seeded, nudged, even implanted. That they watch us not with fear, but with investment. That we are part of something larger than we understand, not pawns, but offspring. Or worse, prototypes. In this view, they are not hiding. They are managing. The idea of cryptoterrestrials has no concrete proof, no fossils, no photographs, no government documents leaked under redacted margins. But it has shadows. And in the quiet spaces of the human mind, the places that stir just before sleep, shadows speak. They ask, what if we're not alone, not from without, but from within? Imagine lying in bed, and just beneath the hum of your ceiling fan, you hear it, the faint memory of a footstep that was never yours. A breath that didn't come from your lungs. A presence that isn't malevolent, but isn't explainable either. What if the world you know is only one version of Earth? Not in parallel, but in depth. And the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes, not with monsters or myths, but with truths we forgot to remember. We explore the stars in search of life, but perhaps the life most alien to us was always here, in the silent woods, the forgotten caves, the places where the air grows still and the birds do not sing. And perhaps, as we drift into sleep, they listen, not with ears, but with the quiet knowledge of those who never needed to leave. Not all aliens come from the sky. Some come from the earth. And they never left. There are places in the world where the ground rings hollow beneath the feet, not because it is empty, but because it is layered with secrecy. Caves that stretch into yawning black, bottomless to all but time itself. Seismic maps of Earth's crust whisper of chambers too symmetrical to be random, too silent to be natural. And when humans descend far enough, deeper than light, deeper than the reach of plant roots, deeper than the grasp of memory, something changes. A shift in pressure. A ringing in the ears. A sense that you are no longer just under the earth, but within something older. This is the myth, or perhaps the memory, of the cities of the hollow deep. Forget the romanticized idea of the hollow earth, a sun at the core and lush jungles below. That was a dream drawn in the age of adventure novels. What lies beneath is not tropical, but sacred. Cold, immense, and deliberate. The cryptoterrestrials, if they exist, would not need artificial lighting or open skies. Their civilizations would grow in slow darkness, lit by bioluminescent stone veins or mineral radiance. Their architecture would not rise vertically but spiral inward, growing organically along the pressure lines of the bedrock, shaped by eons of tuning stone and silence into sanctuary. Imagine cities carved not into caverns, but with them, molded by eons of resonance, each corridor humming faintly with the frequency of its purpose. Meeting halls designed like musical instruments. Shelters tuned to cancel seismic tremors. Libraries not of ink but of encoded crystal, pages of memory that sing to those who know how to listen. There would be no need for sunlight. Their eyes, if they have them, would be pale, vast, and hypersensitive, or perhaps they have no eyes at all, seeing through echolocation or magnetoreception. They would hear the shifting of a tectonic plate like we hear the rustle of leaves. Sense the density of passing bodies as we feel warmth in the air. No streets. No windows. But paths, deeply trodden, labyrinthine, known only by those who belong. The hollow deep would be ancient, not built in a decade or a dynasty, but across eras. A single chamber might take thousands of years to reach completion. Slowly shaped by consensus, by generation, by ritual. A kind of civic patience we cannot yet comprehend. And these cities would be not just for survival, but for stewardship. You see, if the cryptoterrestrials exist, they may not see themselves as separate from Earth's ecosystems, but as part of its custodial intelligence. Their settlements would hum with integration. Root systems grown to purify air. Fungal networks that relay alerts like a nervous system. Aquifers fed by artificial gravity troughs. Entire ecocycles simulated underground, invisible to us, sustaining their kind without ever touching the surface. Maybe the reason we find no ruins of theirs is not because they left nothing, but because they leave no waste. No rubble. No scars. Their cities live and die like living organisms, dissolving clean into the stone when they are no longer needed. But some rumors persist, of cavers who go too deep and return mute, or not at all. Of camera drones that lose signal in the same spots again and again. Of anomalous heat signatures detected where there should be none. There are even whispered reports of carved surfaces found hundreds of miles below, not tools, not fossils, but geometry. Right angles in places untouched by human hands. And then there are the lights. Miners in deep shaft operations have long reported phosphorescent pulses, too structured to be natural, too fleeting to photograph. A mining rig in the Ural Mountains once halted for 48 hours after a series of flashes were detected from a borehole thousands of feet below. The official report cited geothermal discharge. The foreman said otherwise. He said, "It blinked back." Could these be their cities signaling in silence? If so, it implies a language. If there is language, there is culture. And if there is culture, there is memory. A memory of Earth that far predates ours. They may remember what the continents looked like before they shifted. What animals once had feathers instead of scales. What climates were born and died before the first human spark. Their cities would be archives, temples, laboratories, and homes, all sculpted into the deep. And their residents? Perhaps they are not so unlike us. Perhaps they sleep. Perhaps they dream. Perhaps they wait, not for conquest, but for alignment. For the right era, the right tilt in human perception. Or perhaps they once ruled openly, and now mourn the surface as one mourns a lost sibling, chaotic, unpredictable, but beloved. The hollow deep may be silent, but it is not empty. It holds the footsteps of those who chose a different path. A way of life that rejected the sky not out of fear, but out of faith, that the soul of the planet was not above, but within. And when we sleep, when the world quiets enough to let the mind drift, we might hear the faintest hum, a harmonic buried in the bones of the earth. Not a warning, not a cry, but a lullaby from below. We often look to the stars for the answer to one question: are we alone? But what if the question has always been misdirected? What if the answer lies not above, but within? Not within our hearts, as the poets say. Not even within our minds, as the philosophers argue. But quite literally within, in our cells, in our sequences, in our silent code. Genetics is a language older than speech, written in spirals and segments, curled inside every leaf, every claw, every child. It is precise, efficient, brutally honest. And yet, hidden within the tapestry of human DNA, there are anomalies. Segments that do not correspond to any known function. Repeats. Echoes. Interruptions. Genomic fossils, some call them, the scars of ancient viral infections or long extinct adaptations. But what if they are more than scars? What if they are signatures? The theory is whispered, obscure, and often dismissed, but persistent, that buried deep within our genome are fragments of another intelligence. Not extraterrestrial, but cryptoterrestrial. Not from the stars, but from the shadows of Earth's forgotten chapters. Imagine a species, older than Homo sapiens, perhaps older than the Neanderthals. Not vanished, but withdrawn. A lineage that learned long ago how to interface with biology at a molecular level. A culture of genetic artisans, crafting not tools or cities, but blueprints. To them, DNA would be scripture, the body a vessel, and evolution a palette. Such beings might not leave bones behind, but blueprints. They would encode their influence into the reproductive lines of dominant species, riding the wave of life forward in time like a hidden melody behind the loud chorus of history. They might exist within us like a faint watermark, not quite visible, not quite erased. There are stretches of the human genome called endogenous retroviruses, ancient genetic inserts that science recognizes as remnants of viral invasions. But some of these segments are astonishingly complex. Others are shared between species that haven't had a common ancestor for millions of years. A few seem to have no known origin at all. Could these be the remnants of contact? Not a handshake or a message, but a merge? It's a disturbing idea that our thoughts, our instincts, perhaps even our dreams, might be shaped in part by an intelligence we no longer remember. That deep behaviors, our attraction to specific symbols, our responses to certain fears, our shared myths of beings from beneath or beyond, might be echoes of a genetic story too ancient to read consciously. Consider this: across nearly every culture there are myths of watchers. Not gods, not spirits, watchers. Beings who observe, who guide subtly, who sometimes intervene, not with fire and thunder, but with quiet nudges. They are described as wise, distant, and familiar. And they always seem to know more than they should. Could these myths be personifications of something felt but not seen? A pressure in the bloodline? A voice behind the eyes? There are even those who claim that certain individuals, rare, sensitive, often out of step with their time, carry markers of these cryptic origins. They dream in strange architectures. They perceive patterns where others see noise. They feel drawn to the Earth's deep places without knowing why. Some call them empaths, others anomalies. But maybe they are not alone. Maybe the cryptoterrestrials never left. Maybe they simply folded themselves into us, gene by gene, choosing preservation over presence. Perhaps they foresaw a future in which open contact would be impossible, but resonance would endure, where they could no longer walk among us in form, but might echo through us in mind. Of course, such ideas are speculation. Beautiful, haunting, unprovable. But the genome remains a vast ocean. Only a small fraction has been truly mapped. The rest is called junk, though scientists now admit that label is premature. It is not junk. It is unread. It is vast. It is waiting. What if it is whispering? What if, as we sleep, and the conscious mind finally quiets, the older voice stirs, not with words, but with instinct, with image, with intuition? Perhaps the reason we sometimes wake with strange memories, of places we've never seen, emotions without cause, languages we do not speak, is because the old code is speaking. Not of the future, not of the stars, but of our inheritance, our unseen family, our veiled architects. So the question remains: are we alone? Or are we simply the latest verse in a song that's been playing for far longer than we remember? There are names that vanish from the records. People, families, even entire villages, simply gone. No graves. No wreckage. No farewell. In the cold terrain of history, we mark them as outliers, the missing, the lost, the unaccounted. But what if some disappearances were not accidents, but invitations? The world is littered with these mysteries. Roanoke, the Flannan Isles, the Anjukuni village, each cloaked in silence, in speculation, in frost. A ship discovered adrift, its crew gone without a trace. A village abandoned, fire still warm, food half-eaten. A herd of cattle frozen where they stood, eyes wide, unseeing. We explain these stories away with weather, war, wild animals. But somewhere inside, we feel the chill of something else. A pattern, a presence, something selective. Throughout folklore, across countless regions and tongues, there exist tales of those who were taken, not by gods or demons, but by the hidden folk. Not spirits, but others. Whispered of as the quiet people, the pale ones, the below, or the watchers behind the wall. They were said to emerge only in the stillness, in fog, in deep forests, in snowy silence. They left no footprints, but open doors. They did not shout, but compelled with a stare. And those who went with them? They were never found. Not broken. Not harmed. Just absent. Some believe these are fables, metaphors for loneliness or loss. But what if they are distorted memories of contact? What if certain people, perhaps at key moments in history, were selected not for harm, but for preservation? Imagine a civilization older than ours, hidden beneath the skin of this world. A people who have survived cataclysm, conquest, and collapse by remaining unseen, but who, from time to time, choose to rescue. Not because of altruism, not even out of necessity, but to preserve diversity, to record complexity, to keep something rare. An artist, a child, a storyteller, a healer, someone carrying a thread that should not be lost. A genetic marker, a memory, a voice. They take them in silence, leave no trace, no war, no struggle, only a question, a hole in the map. It is said that among some indigenous communities, there are legends of certain individuals returning, years or even generations later, changed. Their eyes deeper, their speech slower, their dreams more vivid. They speak little of where they were. But when they do, their words resemble poetry more than prose. They describe light that feels like music, hallways carved not in stone, but in air, conversations without sound, and a strange sensation of belonging, as if they had always known this place, and simply forgot. They described no cities, no armies, no gods, only a presence, a family of sorts, watching, waiting. Could these be the cryptoterrestrials? Have they shaped our history not by conquest, but by curation? Are they the invisible gardeners of human complexity, removing, preserving, and returning elements as needed? It is a terrifying and tender idea that someone is watching, that someone cares enough to save, but not interfere, not rule. And perhaps that is why they remain hidden. Because exposure would ruin the delicate balance. Because their survival depends on silence. Or perhaps because they know we are not ready, not yet, to understand who they are, or what we truly are. There is a threshold within the human mind. A veil not of fabric, but of attention. It's not that we can't see. It's that we're not looking. In the symphony of perception, our senses are filters. Narrow bands tuned for survival, not for revelation. We miss the ultraviolet glimmering on a leaf, the low hum of seismic tremors beneath our feet, the faint echo of language shaped without sound. So what, then, might be living just outside those bounds? Imagine a species not constrained by our sensory palette, not invisible in the magical sense, but simply calibrated differently. To us, they are as shadows in peripheral vision, as warmth without source, as the hairs rising on the back of the neck. We call them watchers. They call themselves nothing. Or maybe they do, in a tongue formed of frequencies we never evolved to hear. Some theorists speak of cryptoterrestrials as phase-shifted entities, existing in what physicists might call a bradyonic offset, a slight alteration in the way they process time, motion, and energy. To our eyes, they are smeared ghosts. To theirs, we are clumsy, loud, and frighteningly fast. We build cameras to see further, radars to detect what moves. But what if their motion is not one of velocity, but of thought? Not faster than light, but quieter than silence. Ancient mystics spoke of veils. The veil of Isis, the liminal curtain, the idea that reality is layered, and only through altered perception can one pierce it. Sleep, meditation, shock, trauma, or some rare mutation of the brain. These are cracks through which the hidden world sometimes leaks. Children see them, we say, then forget. The senile whisper of voices, the madman's fixation on being followed, the artist's compulsion to draw the same silent figure over and over again. These are dismissed as noise, as pathology. But what if they are memories? Residual interactions with something always just beyond our focal depth. There are those who report consistent phenomena in liminal spaces. Elevator mirrors that reflect a second face, just for a moment. Stairwells where time stutters. Tunnels where shadows are too thick. Urban legends? Or overlap? In this theory, the cryptoterrestrials are not beneath us in evolution nor above, but simply next to us, coexisting in the dimensional attic of reality, the crawl space of the known. Like mushrooms beneath the forest floor, they remain unseen, yet essential, interwoven with us in ways we cannot measure. Sometimes, those attuned enough claim to feel them, not see. Feel. A presence in the room before waking. A movement in the mirror when turning away. The precise moment when silence becomes too perfect. And always, the sense that you are not alone. Not watched with malice, but with patience. Perhaps the cryptoterrestrials do not wish to dominate or deceive. Perhaps they simply choose privacy. A species built on avoidance, not secrecy. Their genius not in invisibility, but in irrelevance. They live in the gaps, in the error margins of perception, in the difference between noticing and believing. And maybe, just maybe, they are waiting for us to widen our gaze, to question our filters, to seek not answers, but new questions. For only then might we find them, or finally realize they were never hiding, only quiet. There are stories older than nations, whispers passed like heirlooms through generations, of things that look like us, but are not us. They sit at our tables, they walk our streets, they nod in crowded trains, buy apples from vendors, read books at parks. And yet, something in the angles of their faces, the rhythm of their movements, the cold precision of their eyes, makes the hairs on your arm rise before your logic ever catches up. These are the myths of the disguised ones. Cryptoterrestrials not hiding in shadows or dimensions, but among us, in plain sight. Every culture has its own word for them. The Irish called them changelings. In India, they were Rakshasas in human form. In Japan, the yokai who wore skin-like robes. In medieval Europe, doppelgangers. In postmodern theory, mimetic infiltrators. Could these stories be distorted memories? Fragments of encounters with an intelligence that adapted not just to our world, but to us? Imagine a species capable of extreme behavioral mimicry. Not just appearance, but cultural fluency. They wouldn't need superior weapons or faster ships. Only patience. They would study our gestures, our rituals. The minute differences between sincerity and sarcasm. The weight of grief in a handshake. The joy behind a silence. And then, they would perform humanity. Perfectly. Almost. Perhaps you've felt it before. The uncanny moment in conversation when someone's smile arrives a second too late. The eye contact that lingers a hair too long. The laughter that mimics cadence but lacks spark. We dismiss it. Call it social awkwardness, neurodivergence, cultural difference. But deep down, part of you whispers, this is not error. It is precision that's slightly misaligned. There are historical accounts, from isolated mountain towns and rural settlements, of outsiders who arrived, lived peacefully, then vanished without trace. They paid in unrecognizable coins. They ate strange fruit that none could name. Their dialect was archaic yet somehow local. In a village in Eastern Europe, a family was said to host an uncle who never aged. In the Himalayas, travelers spoke of monks with eyes like copper mirrors. Even in the 21st century, urban tales persist. The subway passenger who never blinks. The hotel guest who checks in but not out. The neighbor who's lived there longer than records exist. Is it madness? Or is it a kind of memory suppression we all partake in? Because the truth may be too strange, too destabilizing to hold in daylight thought. Some researchers speculate that if such a species existed, they would have mastered molecular camouflage, skin that adapts like cephalopods, voice boxes that learn new languages in hours, neural structures attuned to micro-expressions and cultural nuance. We may call them disguised, but in their own philosophy, perhaps there is no deception, only participation. They don't view themselves as other. They've long accepted Earth as shared domain, and us as their neighbors. Loud, beautiful, fragile neighbors. Yet their survival depends not on dominance, but in consequence. To be the forgettable man on the bus. The elderly woman who feeds pigeons at dawn. The clerk who works night shifts and never changes. In cities filled with noise and flux, their greatest protection is our own distraction. And so they fade. Not by bending light, but by bending assumption. They may gather at dusk, in quiet warehouses or under bridges, to share memories in languages older than alphabets. They may hold objects we'd call relics, fragments of their homeland, or perhaps artifacts of our own future, and they may be watching not as invaders, but as archivists, recording the rise and fall of human epics, with quiet empathy. One day, when the world slows, when we are ready to perceive what we have trained ourselves not to see, we may turn in the marketplace or on a train platform, and meet eyes that reflect something vast, ancient, and not entirely human. And in that moment, we will remember. We have never been alone. We have merely forgotten how to recognize the others. Before we spoke of language, before we tamed fire, before we even dreamed of sky or myth, there were others. And perhaps they did not leave us behind entirely. Perhaps they left something within us. There is a puzzle buried in our blood, fragments of unknown ancestry, sequences of DNA that do not map cleanly to known hominids. They drift through our genome like ancient whispers, unclaimed, unnamed, yet undeniably present. Geneticists call them ghost lineages, traces of ancient interbreeding events with unknown species. Not Denisovans, not Neanderthals, not Homo sapiens. Something else. A cryptic presence. A phantom in the family tree. When researchers examined modern human DNA, they found up to 10% in certain populations that could not be traced to any known ancestors. Not directly, not indirectly. The statistical models broke. Something, or someone, was missing. Could these be remnants of cryptoterrestrials? Intelligent relatives who split from our lineage before the last ice age, before the migration out of Africa, and chose a different path? Imagine a hominid species that never left the forest, never built cities, but turned inward, became masters of camouflage, silence, and maybe even thought. They would not need our machines. They would not crave conquest. They would value something we forget: invisibility. Perhaps they learned to manipulate perception, not with magic, but with evolutionary precision, infrasound communication, chameleon-like skin adaptation, social patterns built on concealment, not projection. Such a species could persist for hundreds of thousands of years, interacting with us only when necessary, or when desired. And in those rare encounters, they may have left something behind: a child, a mutation, a thread of their memory, woven into our biological fabric. This would explain the myths. The child with the strange eyes, the wanderer who understood animal speech, the prophet whose dreams bend reality. There are cultures across the globe that speak of ancient bloodlines, those blessed or cursed with sight beyond sight, with sensitivity to trees, winds, and stars. In Old Norse, they were seers. In Aboriginal traditions, the dreaming gifted certain ones with connection to land and spirit. In West African tales, bloodlines were guarded and feared, for their knowledge reached backward and sideways through time. What if these gifts are not metaphor? What if they are inheritance? In the quiet places of the world, remote mountain valleys, deep jungle basins, isolated caves that never see the sun, what if remnants remain, not only of culture, but of biology? Some researchers have found anomalous footprints, not hoaxes, not explained by animals, prints with human-like toes, but odd proportions, too long or lacking in arch, found thousands of miles apart, and yet eerily consistent, in caves once thought empty, undisturbed for tens of thousands of years. Strange hairs have been found, too thick to be human, too coarse for known apes, and no DNA match. And what of the persistent reports from hikers, hunters, and spiritual pilgrims who speak of being watched by eyes they cannot describe, hearing words not spoken aloud? Most are dismissed, filed under hallucination, fear, or folklore. But taken together, they form a pattern that suggests we are not the sole stewards of Earth, nor its sole inheritors. Cryptoterrestrials may not just live beside us, they may live within us, in the flicker of instinct, the moment of knowing without knowing, the genetic memory that wakes in dreams of caves, of lightless forests, of strange lullabies and forgotten tongues. What if those memories are not dreams? What if they are invitations? And all this time, We have been carrying their legacy in our marrow, waiting for the world to quiet enough to hear their call. The fire crackles. Outside, wind moves through the trees like a breath too old to name. Around the circle, elders speak, not just to each other, but to something unseen. Their voices low, rhythmic, threading between embers and silence. These stories do not begin with, "Once upon a time." They begin with a look, a hush, a feeling that something sacred is being remembered, or perhaps warned. In almost every culture, there are tales of beings who live just beneath the veil. Not gods, not ghosts, not demons, but others. They are watchers in the forest, pale shapes behind the trees, silent guests beneath the floorboards. They come not from the sky, but from underneath. The mountain, the river, the skin of the world. We have called them many names. In the British Isles, the Sidhi. Not fairies as modern cartoons paint them, but tall, pale, uncanny beings who dwell in hollow hills and take the living when the veil grows thin. In the Himalayas, the Yeti. Not merely a snow ape, but a guardian of mountain paths, appearing only to those who see with the old sight. In the forests of the Pacific Northwest, Sasquatch. The wild man. A giant cloaked in moss and silence. Not hunted, but guarding. Not beast, but ancestor. In ancient Mesopotamia. The Apkallu, wise beings from beneath the sea. Half man, half fish. Who rose from the deep to teach language and laws, then vanished beneath the waves. In African folklore, the Chitahuri, reptilian beings who walk among humans, in disguise, manipulating destinies from the shadows. These names change, but the pattern remains. Hidden intelligences, close enough to touch, yet untouchable. Seen only by the desperate, the gifted, the mad, known through dreams, visions, and moments when time seems to shift sideways. They are not always hostile, but they are not always kind. Sometimes they offer knowledge, a herb that heals, a song that calls rain, a warning before the flood. Other times they take a child who vanishes without trace, a hunter never found, a memory that doesn't belong, but always they return. In new stories, in new tongues, always the same presence behind the mask. And perhaps that is the point. The mask. The anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Myth is not a lie, but a truth told in a different language." Could folklore be the long memory of humanity? Our way of recording what science has not yet named? When we laugh at the village tale of the man who vanished into the woods, only to return 30 years later with no memory, are we laughing at the truth in an unfamiliar dialect? Because deep in the archives, in museum basements and private collections, there are stories that don't fit the narrative. Not hoaxes, not hallucinations, just fragments. A set of footprints that lead into a cave and never out. A stone tablet, found thousands of miles from any civilization, carved with symbols matching no known language. A shepherd who disappeared for 4 nights and returned speaking a language no one could recognize, not even himself. And then there are the stories we don't write down. We pass them in whispers. At dusk, with one hand on the doorframe, the grandmother who swears she was visited in her youth by something that wasn't a man, but not a monster either. The child who draws the same impossible figure before ever seeing a book. The elder who never leaves the mountain because they're still there, watching. These are not UFOs, not distant stars. These are near, beneath our feet, inside our skin. Cryptoterrestrials may not be alien. They may be ancient, not from another world, but another layer of this one. They may live in the stories, not as characters, but as authors, shaping our memories, nudging our myths. There is a strange consistency in the symbols. The spiral, the eye, the doorway. They appear again and again. From cave walls in France, to tribal drums in the Amazon, to dream journals in modern apartments. It's almost as if someone is reminding us, not with technology, but with narrative. Because while tools rust, stories endure. And perhaps the cryptoterrestrials, if that is even what they are, know that better than we do. If you wanted to survive forever, would you build a city? Or would you build a myth? And if you did, could you live inside it? Could you become a whisper, passed from mouth to mouth, never fully seen, but always there? Perhaps you already have. The next time a child tells you of the tall person with silver eyes, who spoke to them in their sleep, listen. The next time you feel watched, in a room you know is empty, pause. The next time you dream of hands not your own, turning pages in a library of bone and moss, remember, we are not alone, not in the way we think. Some truths are older than language, and some beings do not die. They fade, and in the folds of story, in the hollows of hills, in the forgotten words we say without knowing, they remain, watching, waiting, and maybe still speaking. You just have to know how to listen. There are moments in a life, rare and quiet, when one's thoughts do not feel entirely one's own. A sudden phrase whispered into waking consciousness, an image you could never have imagined, but which arrives whole and vivid behind your eyes. A decision, a hunch, a turn in the road. That comes not from logic or instinct, but something else. What if these moments were not anomalies? What if they were touch points, brief incursions by another intelligence, who doesn't speak in sound, but in thought itself? Throughout the ages, there have been those who claim to speak with the divine, prophets, mystics, madmen. But what if what they touched, what reached back, was not a god, but a neighbor, a cryptoterrestrial, not living in the sky or under the sea, but within the folds of human awareness? It would not need technology, not ships, not metal or fire. It would need only a doorway into mind, and perhaps it has always had it. Some philosophers have pondered the strange fact that humans are rarely alone in their heads. The inner voice, the divided self, the hidden observer. Why do so many cultures speak of spirit guides, guardian voices, ancestral whispers? Could these be masks for the same entity? An ancient intelligence that doesn't control thought, but steers it, not in words, but in nudges, not in commands, but in suggestion. The Greeks called it the daimon, an unseen companion that inspired poets and philosophers. Socrates himself claimed to be guided by one, a voice ever present, offering not answers, but directions. In modern psychology, we call these experiences dissociation, intuition, or even schizophrenia. But across time and cultures, these voices remain eerily consistent, soft, calm, just beyond reach, but strangely invested in you. What if some part of our consciousness has never been entirely human? This is the heart of the borrowed mind hypothesis. that cryptoterrestrials may not be seen, but they are heard, or more accurately, felt, in the flicker of genius, in the sudden memory that doesn't belong, in the urge to write, to build, to seek, things we've never known, yet recognize. In the Amazon rainforest, certain shamans report being taught songs and rituals by forest spirits that enter their dreams and leave behind knowledge of plants, healing, and geometry no human could have invented alone. In remote monasteries, monks have transcribed symbols given to them during trances, later found to mirror the mathematical constants of galaxies never observed until modern telescopes. In psychiatric wards, some patients sketch beings they've never been told about, but which perfectly resemble ancient carvings from cultures continents apart. These are not proofs, they are patterns, and in patterns, the cryptoterrestrials hide. What would a mind being want? Not conquest, not riches, but perhaps continuity, the ability to persist, to evolve alongside us. Unseen, but never absent. It may influence history not by wars or invention, but by ideas seeded quietly into the collective mind. Ideas of unity, of structure, of balance. Even stories, especially stories. A being that lives in thought would use mythology as its ship, emotion as its fuel. What if the myths of the world were not inventions, but introductions? Encoded memories of something we once knew, or still know, but only in dreams. And dreams are where the clues converge. Lucid dreamers report places they cannot have imagined. Endless libraries, ancient cities of light, cathedrals that stretch into skyless voids. And sometimes, they are met by figures with no face, but presence, who do not speak, but understand, who seem interested. These encounters are often benevolent, but not always. Some dreamers report mind intrusions, visions too vivid to be their own, and the sense of being studied, not malevolently, but methodically, as if part of a long, slow experiment. If cryptoterrestrials are real, and if they dwell in mind, then every idea we've ever had might be a collaboration. Our greatest works, architecture, art, mathematics, faith, might be duets. And that changes everything, because it means we are never alone, not in fear, not in madness, not even in genius. There is always another, a presence in the wings, a whisper in the mirror, a co-author, co-dreamer, co-conspirator in our quest to understand ourselves. And that is both terrifying and comforting. It explains the pull to the sacred, the ineffable sense of being watched, not by a camera, but by a consciousness, one that isn't elsewhere, but here, not apart from us, but within. If this is true, then the cryptoterrestrials may not be a separate species. They may be the other half of our mind, the part that remembers, that dreams, that knows the stars, even when we forget. And as we fall asleep tonight, let us wonder, which of our thoughts are truly ours, and which are gifts from something deeper, older, waiting to be known? Perhaps the mind is not a house, but a shared chamber, with doors that open both ways, and on the other side, a presence that listens, waits, and occasionally reaches through. There is a myth older than language, that beneath the soil we walk, beneath the mountains we climb, beneath the sea we sail, something else walks, climbs and swims, not spirits, not the dead, but something alive, something old. What if the Earth is not fully ours? What if it never was? The notion that another intelligent species might dwell here with us, but in secret, is often dismissed as fantasy, yet it persists. In folklore, in whispers, in dreams. The idea that there are cryptoterrestrials not just living near us, but intertwined with our environment, camouflaged by evolution, by biology, by myth. Imagine beings not of the sky, but of stone and water and wind, not extraterrestrials, but infraterrestrials, entities born of Earth, but separate from humanity's tree. They might inhabit the deepest caves, where pressure crushes human lungs, and no light has ever touched stone. Or they might live in volcanic tunnels, thriving on sulfur and magnetism. Some biologists have asked a quiet question. Could intelligence have evolved more than once on Earth? We assume we are the only torchbearers. But evolution is not a straight road. It is a web, a lattice of possibility. Perhaps a civilization arose before ours, tens of millions of years ago, then vanished, buried by time and tectonics, leaving only whispers in the fossil record. Or perhaps they didn't vanish at all. Perhaps they retreated. They watched as we emerged from the plains, stone tools in hand, still half-formed and chaotic. They observed our firelight, our laughter, our violence, and they chose secrecy. To survive, they disappeared, not into the stars, but deeper into the earth. They could have changed themselves, adapted to the darkness, made themselves unseen, and we would never know. There are caves in Mexico, where ancient miners spoke of the Watchers, not spirits, but beings with luminous eyes, who disappeared into fissures too small for a man to follow. There are tunnels beneath Turkey, cities carved by unknown hands, with ventilation systems beyond their time. In Tibet, monks tell of Nagas, serpentine beings with great wisdom, who dwell in underground palaces of radiant crystal, only emerging to whisper insights into the ears of mystics. Are these just stories? Or are they ancestral memories of something humanity once knew and then forgot? There's the legend of Agartha, a hidden realm beneath the earth, home to a race more advanced, more peaceful, more ancient than man. Across continents, across languages, the idea repeats. Not aliens from above, but neighbors below. It would explain many things. Unexplained subterranean sounds, recorded by seismographs but without epicenters. The low hums heard in remote valleys, never traced to any natural cause. Sudden disappearances in deep caves, never found again. And stranger still, the occasional appearance of beings who don't quite look human, yet try to pass. Stories of strangers who speak every language, whose passports are from countries that don't exist, who vanish when questioned too closely. Could these be scouts? Cryptoterrestrials studying us, monitoring our progress, trying, perhaps, to help. But always, from the shadows, there are children who draw maps of cities underground they've never seen. Adults who dream of crystalline halls filled with strange singing machines. Scientists who report flickers of radar echoes beneath Antarctica's ice, shaped like spires and domes, then are reassigned before they can speak further. Are these anomalies? Or messages? If an older civilization lives within Earth, they would not think like us. They might not value the surface, the sky, the sun. They would treasure heat, silence, continuity. Their architecture would be invisible, their signals non-electronic, their society untraceable. Unless you know where to look. And we rarely look down. The notion of cryptoterrestrials hiding on Earth has been considered, even in science. The Silurian hypothesis posits that an advanced species might once have ruled the planet, and we wouldn't know, because geological time erases all. But if some adapted, some survived, then perhaps they are still here, watching, waiting, occasionally interacting, not to harm, but to guide, to nudge, to preserve a world they once called their own. Perhaps the greatest contact has never come from space. Perhaps it came from beneath. The Earth is deep, older than we remember, full of places never touched by sunlight, where silence reigns, where memory lingers, where something else may still breathe. If we listen closely, perhaps we'll hear them. A whisper in the wind shaft, a flicker in a mining camera, a dream of hands unlike our own, yet gentle and terribly familiar. Not aliens, not strangers, but Earth's forgotten children, cryptoterrestrials, the first minds, the hidden kin. And as we lie beneath the stars, our heads resting on the surface we think we know, they lie beneath, patient, ancient, awake. Somewhere beneath the endless reach of the ocean lies a story too ancient for books, too vast for maps, and too quiet for memory. It sleeps beneath sediment and time, beneath silt-draped plateaus and salt-preserved ruins, where the seafloor cradles the bones of something lost, not just a city, but a civilization. The myth of Atlantis has been reduced to allegory, a moral tale, a philosophical metaphor. Yet for thousands of years, scattered across cultures and continents, have echoed persistent rumors of lands swallowed by the sea, of places once great, now forgotten. Not one, not just Plato's island, but many. What if these stories are not fantasy, but fragments? What if humanity is not the first wave, but the latest? We have dug temples from deserts and cities from jungles. We have mapped rivers that no longer flow and read languages spoken by no one living. But the sea keeps its secrets. Beneath the crushing blue, the ocean preserves. It erases, but also embalms. Deep in the western Atlantic, sonar scans have traced vast rectilinear structures beneath the silt near the Bahamas. Off the coast of India, ruins lie beneath the Gulf of Combat, aligned in symmetry, their stones older than the Harappan cities. And farther south, along the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument rests like a staircase to the void. Megalithic and mysterious, carved or natural, no one knows for sure. Some researchers whisper of the sunken world theory, a lost age when Earth's sea levels were far lower, exposing lands now drowned. During the last ice age, massive portions of the Earth's surface were dry, places where humans, or perhaps others, could have built. If a continent had once risen in the Atlantic, positioned perfectly between Europe, Africa, and the Americas, it would have been the ideal cradle for an early, expansive civilization. A place of mild climate, bountiful resources, and easy sea access. The Greeks spoke of Atlantis with awe, a land of knowledge and immense power, undone by its pride and swallowed in a single night of quakes and floods. Plato placed it beyond the Pillars of Heracles. But he did not invent the tale. He claimed it came from the Egyptians, who remembered more than the Greeks ever knew. Egypt itself clings to anomalies. The Great Sphinx, with weathering more consistent with torrential rains than desert winds, hints at an age far older than its official history. What if it, too, remembers Atlantis? What if the pyramids are echoes of older geometries, a language once spoken on another land, now drowned. Many cultures hold their own Atlantean memories. The Aboriginal Australians speak of Kumari Kandam, a sunken southern continent. The Tamil people remember Lemuria, lost to the Indian Ocean. The Aztecs tell of Aztlan, a vanished island homeland. These are not the same names, nor always the same stories, but the pattern persists. Perhaps these were not different myths, but the same truth remembered differently. Imagine standing on the cliffs of Atlantis, 1,000 generations ago. The sea glittering below, the towers behind you carved from coral and volcanic stone. A civilization of astronomers, navigators, and dreamers, who watched the stars not with wonder, but with memory. They knew the sky. They charted the heavens as one maps a home, not distant, but familiar. They may have wielded knowledge we've forgotten. Not magic, not myth, but sciences rooted in the earth and stars, now lost to the flood. Energy drawn from crystalline resonances. Architecture harmonized with the planet's pulse. A society in tune with forces we only now begin to rediscover. But pride is a fault older than time. Whether by arrogance, cosmic accident, or some natural wrath, the land fractured. The sea rose. And all was undone. The survivors, if any remained, would have scattered. Fragments of their memory passed into oral tradition. Their symbols, etched in stone, would become sacred signs. Their wisdom, too vast to translate, would fade into legend. They would become gods, or demons, or forgotten entirely. And yet, sometimes, we remember. In dreams of cities beneath the waves. In déjà vu among ruins. In the feeling, impossible to articulate, that we have lost something enormous. Modern satellite imaging has found what looks like grid pattern formations at the bottom of seas once above water. Ruins found beneath Lake Titicaca. Megalithic alignments in the Andes that suggest pre-Incan knowledge far beyond expected timelines. Even Antarctica, beneath its ice, may house secrets no one is ready to uncover. Why do so many megalithic sites share similar angles? Why do ancient myths all speak of a flood, not metaphorical, but literal? Why are so many of our sacred symbols carved into stone far older than the civilizations who claim them? Perhaps because we are remembering the same story. A story of brilliance and fall. Of fire and flood. Of something that once was, and now is gone. Not one Atlantis, but many. An age of lost continents, drowned not just by water, but by time. As you lie beneath your blanket, listening to the soft rhythms of breath and silence, imagine the tides pulling away just for a moment. Imagine walking on a vast stone plaza beneath the sea. Imagine hearing the echo of footsteps, yours and someone else's. Someone who lived long ago. Someone who waited. The ocean holds more than fish and salt. It holds memory. It holds us. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you might hear the chorus of a sunken world, still singing in the deep. In the shadow of our waking world lies a fault line, not of geology, but of remembrance. Across that seam run fractures in time, gaps in our collective knowing, and stories we cannot place. We stand upon continents built atop older bones, and each civilization, no matter how new, walks in the footsteps of something that came before. For every pillar we raise, there is a column buried. For every temple that crowns a hill, a forgotten foundation waits beneath. This is not superstition. It is stratigraphy. When archaeologists speak of lost civilizations, they often refer to those known to history yet forgotten in detail: the Mycenaeans, the Olmecs, the Indus Valley peoples. But what of the civilizations for which there are no names? No writings? No known language? Those whose bones lie crushed beneath tectonic plates or drowned under rising seas. The Earth's surface is not permanent. It shifts, grinds, and groans. Continents drift, mountains rise, oceans claim the land. An entire city could vanish beneath the delta, slowly covered in sediment and time, never to be seen again. It is not implausible. It is inevitable. And it may have happened before. Many times. Consider Zealandia, a submerged continent beneath New Zealand, nearly the size of India. Only recently recognized, it vanished beneath the Pacific 23 million years ago. It is not legend. It is geological fact. Now imagine what might still lie within that drowned land. Or Doggerland, a vast landmass that once connected Britain to mainland Europe. It supported human life, hunting camps, villages, hearths glowing under distant, stormy skies. Then, as the Ice Age ended, the sea rose, and the land sank. One day, it was no longer there. In a single moment, whole landscapes ceased to exist. And yet we forget. Because water does not leave behind dust or ash, it leaves silence. It is in this silence that the stories of Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, and other sunken worlds dwell. They are not merely tales, they are echoes. The murmur of memory lost beneath the waves, resurfacing in dreams, myths, and puzzling remnants. Stone blocks scattered on the ocean floor. Granite structures aligned to cardinal points. Columns buried beneath layers of ash and coral. Lines that do not erode as nature would leave them, but remain too precise, too intentional. Skeptics claim coincidence. But coincidence becomes conviction when it repeats across continents. The Mahabalipuram temples in India, once believed legend, were confirmed when the tsunami of 2004 pulled back the ocean to reveal submerged shrines. In Peru, the ruins of Paititi are still sought in the dense jungle, whispered to hold a vault of knowledge from before the Incas. Beneath the dense foliage, LiDAR has revealed geometric patterns and roads vanishing into canopy, too organized to be random. There is an archaeological amnesia to our species, a refusal to remember what we cannot fit into chronology. We label the unexplainable as myth because we cannot carbon date memory. And yet, sometimes, the memory lingers. In the magnetic patterns of stone, too smooth, too aligned. In the resonance of underground chambers, tuned, as if for sound. In the astronomical alignments of ancient ruins, stars match to sky positions not seen for tens of thousands of years. What were these people watching? What stories did they inherit? And what did they lose? Perhaps they watched the same sun, but with different fears. Not of drought or plague, but of the tide. Because the water always comes. What remains in the minds of those who survived? How many travelers fled rising seas, carrying only stories and symbols? How many myths about great floods are not metaphors, but reports? There are hundreds of flood myths. From Mesopotamia to China. From the Inuit to the Aboriginal Australians. From the Yoruba to the Greeks. And they all speak of something that washed away the world. Did it happen more than once? The evidence of these forgotten lands is not always physical. Sometimes it's genetic. There are anomalies in ancient DNA, markers of divergence that don't line up neatly with known migratory paths. Linguistic roots that defy tree branch logic, appearing isolated but rich, as if transplanted from vanished tongues. Who taught the builders of Göbekli Tepe to lift megaliths before farming even began? Why do the Olmec heads bear features that seem foreign even to the peoples of their own land? Why do so many myths speak of knowledge given, not discovered? We may be descendants of survivors, of those who remembered just enough to begin again, of those who carved warnings into stone and built myths like lighthouses in the dark. Perhaps what we call progress is only the return to something once known. And perhaps beneath the silt and pressure, beneath miles of water and deeper still beneath forgetting, waits the memory of what we once were, waiting to be remembered, not through excavation, but through awakening. Beneath our feet lie entire chapters of human history still locked in silence. We stand atop ruins built upon ruins, cities whose foundations are older than their myths, whose names have vanished not only from records, but from memory itself. And yet, through the soft erosion of time, some structures resist, like bones that refuse to turn to dust. These bones belong to the forgotten architects, not just of buildings, but of language, of belief, of thought. When we speak of lost continents, we don't mean metaphor alone. There are vast, sunken masses of land buried under our oceans, places like Sunderland, Beringia, and the submerged plateaus of the Caribbean. These weren't just barren lands, they were habitable. And the human timeline grows stranger as our instruments grow sharper. Stone tools have been found 100 meters beneath the North Sea. Cave systems in Yucatan show signs of ritual use 12,000 years ago, long before written history. And beneath Lake Titicaca, megalithic structures sit silent, unmoving, unreachable. Time is not kind to memory, but stone remembers. Let us journey to the Kerguelen Plateau, a vast sunken continent in the southern Indian Ocean. For millions of years, it stood above sea level, before slowly descending. Geological data shows it had rivers, flora, and likely life. But we find no ruins, no fossils, no echoes. What if its inhabitants were not like us? What if they left no trace, not because they were absent, but because their presence was other? In our obsession with the known, we've dismissed the possibility that intelligent life could rise, flourish, and vanish without ever becoming what we'd recognize as civilization. What if consciousness didn't always need fire? What if knowledge once flowed through song, not script? What if an entire race lived beneath the waves, or within stone, and we walk upon their ruins, blind to the language they left? The temples of Nan Madol in Micronesia, a city built on coral reefs, made of 750,000 tons of basalt stone, without a quarry on site. Its construction defies explanation, its origins lost. Local legend says the stones were flown into place. We laugh at the idea, but we do not explain it. We dismiss without understanding. Or take the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. Its massive, right-angled terraces provoke fierce debate. Natural formation? Or deliberate? The arguments say more about our discomfort with mystery than the site itself. We do not like to imagine that we do not know. But perhaps the greatest evidence for lost civilizations lies in the stories we carry. Stories of lighted cities beneath the sea. Of tall beings who vanished into stone. Of songs that awaken when the wind cuts across a particular ridge of rock. These are not mere myths. They are instructions. They are invitations to remember what we once allowed ourselves to forget. That the world is not fully mapped. That history is not fully written. That for all our satellites and seismographs, we are still blind to half the Earth's memory. In the jungles of South America, entire cities lie hidden beneath the canopy. LiDAR scanning reveals vast roads, plazas, and pyramids beneath the trees. Some of these are older than the oldest known cultures in the region. The Amazon was not always wild. It may have been gardened. And the Garden of Eden may not be a beginning, but a memory. Atlantis was not a city. It was an idea. A symbol of knowledge, of power, of hubris, yes, but also of loss. And what of Lemuria? Of Kumari Kandam? Are these not echoes of the same event? Different cultures whispering the same wound? The earth bears scars. And some of them are so old, they'd become invisible. But not to everyone. There are those who still dream of cities beneath the waves, of bells that toll underwater, of voices that hum through coral, of doors that cannot be seen, only felt. And maybe that's where the lost still live. Not in maps or textbooks, but in that quiet, ancestral place where story and stone entwine, waiting for us to remember the path. Before we knew it as a desolate white void, Antarctica may have worn a different name, one now buried in ice and forgotten. When we speak of lost continents, we often imagine sunken islands swallowed by oceans, or civilizations erased by fire and flood. But what if one was buried in silence? Not drowned, but frozen? Not forgotten by legend, but removed from time itself? Beneath Antarctica's miles-thick glacial shell, satellite scans reveal topographies that resemble river systems, valleys, even what some have dared to interpret as possible artificial structures. Long ridgelines aligned with geometrical precision, odd, symmetrical elevations that resist natural explanation. The continent wasn't always locked in ice. Roughly 34 million years ago, it was temperate, humid. Fossil evidence points to thriving forests, freshwater lakes, and a biosphere bustling with life. Some researchers propose it remained partially green far more recently, perhaps even during the earliest human civilizations. Could it have once supported a human, or pre-human, presence? There are ancient maps that make this question more than idle speculation. The Piri Reis map of 1513, a mysterious compilation of even older charts, appears to depict the coast of Antarctica, accurately aligned, as it would be if it were free of ice. This map predates the continent's modern discovery by centuries. More troubling still, it shows a coastline that would have only been visible thousands of years ago, before it was covered by the Antarctic ice sheet. How could ancient sailors chart what modern satellites took centuries to see? Some suggest it is coincidence, or misinterpretation. Others whisper of source maps now lost, drawn from the records of a people with knowledge beyond our own. Let us step deeper into this possibility. Imagine a civilization that flourished during Earth's last interglacial period, some 120,000 years ago. The sea levels were different, the climates unfamiliar, and Antarctica, perhaps not yet Antarctica as we know it. If an advanced culture arose there, it would now be buried beneath 2 miles of crushing ice. What would remain? Not tools, not cities, but perhaps alignments. Gravitational anomalies have been detected beneath the ice sheet, regions where the mass does not conform to expectations. Could these anomalies mark the remains of vast structures? Or the energetic echoes of what once was? In 2016, a team of scientists drilling through Lake Vostok, an immense freshwater lake sealed beneath ice for millions of years, found strange microbial life completely isolated from the surface. If life endures in such darkness, could something else? Consider that the human memory may not begin with Sumer or Egypt, but with something far older. Something that perished not through warfare or collapse, but through erasure by nature itself. And yet, some memories persist. In nearly every culture there are myths of lands beyond the cold, of golden cities hidden in ice, of warm places where none should be. Tibetan legend speaks of Shambhala, a paradise hidden in the coldest regions of the world. Could such stories be fractured recollections of an ancient Antarctic realm? Could Atlantis itself have been misunderstood, not submerged in the sea, but sealed beneath frozen time? There are whispered tales from early explorers, of mountains that rise too sharply, too symmetrically, hidden beneath cloud and blizzard, of deep rumblings that have no source, of impossible warmth detected beneath the sheet. And as the ice melts, accelerated by the breath of a warming planet, what might reemerge? What will we find in that thaw? Not only fossils, but foundations. Not only bacteria, but blueprints. Not only stone, but stories. Perhaps the final lost continent has not yet been found because we are standing on it. Because its truth is buried, not just beneath miles of ice, but beneath centuries of disbelief. The world beneath the ice is not silent. It is simply waiting. There exists a riddle etched across the parchments of history, maps that should not exist, coordinates that defy our known timelines. They are fragments of a memory too vast for modern history to hold, whispers of a world before the world we recognize. Among them, the Pyre Reis map is only the beginning. In dusty archives and forgotten libraries, there are other charts. Orontius Phineas's 1531 map, the Bwatch map, the Zeno brothers' enigmatic chart of the North Atlantic. Many of these depictions show ice-free coastlines where there should be ice, and landmasses where the sea now reigns. They hint at a time when Earth wore a different face. The question is not whether these maps are accurate. They have been measured, examined, overlaid with satellite data. The question is, how did they come to be? Imagine the Earth as it once was, before the crust shifted, before the glaciers crawled across the poles. Imagine a network of seafaring civilizations, now lost, trading knowledge like beads across oceans. Their science may not resemble ours, but their knowledge of the stars, of coastlines, of cartography, may have been precise, methodical, and forgotten. Perhaps they mapped not from the sea, but from the sky. High-altitude surveying. Observational astronomy. Tools made not of silicon and steel, but crystal and resonance. Impossible? Or merely unfamiliar? Civilizations erased by cataclysm often leave behind only echoes, carvings on stone, inexplicable alignments, oral legends stretched across generations like fading photographs. These maps are echoes, but echoes can be measured. How did the ancient world know the precise circumference of the Earth? Why do so many mythologies contain star knowledge accurate beyond naked eye observation? The Dogon of Mali speak of Sirius B, the invisible companion to the brightest star in our sky, knowledge modern astronomy confirmed only in the 20th century. The ancient Sumerians catalogued planetary movements with shocking precision. The Mayans measured solar cycles to within seconds of modern calculation. Perhaps what we call ancient knowledge is simply surviving inheritance, from a time we've chosen to forget. These lost cartographers may not have drawn their world with ink, but with memory, with generational knowledge preserved across eons, disguised as myth. Take, for example, the idea of Lemuria. First proposed as a scientific explanation for certain species' distribution across the Indian and Pacific Oceans, the concept was quickly dismissed in favor of plate tectonics. And yet, stories of a sunken land in the east persist across Indonesia, India, Australia. The Tamil people speak of Kumari Kandam, a continent lost to the sea, where advanced societies once flourished. Can coincidence explain the symmetry of these myths? Could so many cultures, oceans apart, invent the same tale? Or are we glimpsing the scattered pages of a single book, burned, soaked, and buried, but not entirely lost? Even Plato's Atlantis, often dismissed as allegory, may carry truth within its metaphor. He describes a great civilization beyond the Pillars of Heracles, destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. Earthquakes, floods, fire. The same trifecta of ruin echoed in the destruction myths of the Hopi, the Maori, the Yoruba, the Norse. It is always the same story, told in 1,000 different tongues. And the maps, forgotten, dusty, laughed at, sit like broken compasses pointing to the past. But perhaps they don't just show where land once was. Perhaps they show where memory endures. Where stone cities once basked in tropical sun, now lie drowned trenches, unexplored. Where crystalline towers once reflected starlight, now only algae sways. where once cartographers mapped the world with an eye for the sacred, not the strategic. And now we ask, foolishly, how could they know? Because they were there. Because the earth has memory. Because the sea does not forget, it only waits. The maps are not mistakes. They are invitations. And we have only just begun to read them. Beneath our feet, buried under the dunes, forests, and oceans, lie the fractured bones of forgotten architectures, cities without names, monuments without inscriptions, and stone alignments whose purpose has dissolved into myth. Across deserts and deep beneath jungles, echoes of intelligent design persist, far older than the civilizations we proudly claim as the bedrock of history. Consider the Osirian at Abydos, Egypt. Sunken several meters below the level of the surrounding structures, built from monolithic blocks of rose granite, it bears no inscriptions, no cartouches, only age and silence. The water that perennially floods its foundations has not eroded it away, but instead preserves its mystery, as though the Nile guards what it cannot explain. Egyptologists mark it as dynastic, but some geologists, looking at the erosion patterns, whisper of a construction date predating the pharaohs by millennia. In Turkey, the strange mound called Göbekli Tepe shifts the entire understanding of human civilization. Carved pillars over 12,000 years old, aligned with celestial markers, depict animals no longer native to the region, and human forms in a style unlike any known successor. There is no evidence of agriculture around the site, yet the sophistication suggests organization, hierarchy, vision. Who were these builders, capable of mapping the stars and carving monoliths, but leaving behind no known language? Somewhere beneath the sands of the Sahara, satellite imagery reveals grids, rectilinear anomalies, and subterranean structures that do not conform to the language of geology. Vast regions remain unexplored, not due to remoteness, but perhaps reluctance. Even beneath the Amazon rainforest, LiDAR reveals symmetrical ruins, ceremonial roads, and immense terraces that challenge the idea of the jungle as a pristine wilderness. Perhaps it grew over a civilization in collapse, one reclaimed by the very nature it once harnessed. In the Pacific, on the island of Pohnpei, lies the megalithic city of Nan Madol. Hundreds of thousands of basalt columns, hexagonal prisms naturally formed by cooling lava, stacked and arranged into artificial islands. No one knows how the ancient Micronesians moved them, nor why they created such an immense, oceanic citadel. There are whispers of levitation, forgotten technology, and rituals that summoned ocean spirits to carry stone. And at the center of so many mysteries lies a singular question: why were these places abandoned? The answers lie not only in archaeology, but in geology, astronomy, and memory. For many ancient ruins share alignment, not only with cardinal directions or equinoxes, but with constellations long since shifted by precession. These alignments suggest dates older than what history allows, older even than agriculture, when the world's climate was different and the stars spoke a different tongue. What if these structures were built not for gods, but to remember? Not to worship, but to preserve knowledge, encoded in stone, awaiting rediscovery. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, whether names or metaphors, stand for the unspoken history of Earth. And perhaps that history was not lost by accident. Perhaps it was erased. Not by malice, but by necessity. To rebuild after a flood, one must first forget the sea. To survive a solar flare, a meteor impact, a pole shift, the trauma must be buried deeper than any ruin. And so humanity began again. Smaller, simpler, forgetting. But stone remembers. Water remembers. The earth cannot forget what it has borne. The architecture beneath the sand is not just evidence, it is testimony. A record of what once was. A warning of what may come again. And above all, a promise. that buried beneath our assumptions. A deeper truth waits to be unearthed. When the ocean rose to devour their cities, they did not vanish. They migrated. Not with sails or with maps, but with memory stitched into myth and stone. Across every corner of the world, there exist echoes, identical in shape, sentiment, and scar, of a people who once fled from something that consumed not only their homes, but the knowledge of how those homes were built. We do not know their names, but they are remembered. In Mesoamerica, the Mayas spoke of an ancestral land swallowed by water, the land of Mu. Their glyphs described travelers arriving across the sea from the east, bringing maize and stars, architecture and sky lore. The Olmec, even older, sculpted colossal basalt heads whose features have long puzzled archaeologists. Are they portraits of ancestors, or those who came before? Far across the Atlantic, the Dogon tribe of Mali holds sacred knowledge of Sirius, its binary star system, the invisible white dwarf, and its orbital patterns, long before modern telescopes confirmed such a thing existed. They claim it was passed down from the Namo, amphibious beings who arrived from the sky. But could this be distorted memory of ancestors who came not from the sky, but from across a drowned coastline, bringing with them stellar knowledge encoded into cultural myth? The Polynesians tell of Hiva, a sunken homeland once lush and mountainous. Their canoes, long and slender, navigated by stars and swell, spread across thousands of islands, yet their myths all point to a common loss, a center that was lost. Was this a memory of Lemuria? A poetic trace of a continent that may have never existed as landmass, but lived deeply in the psyche of those displaced? In Japan, submerged ruins near Yanaguni challenge the imagination. Step-like terraces, rectangular pools, and even what appears to be a staircase rise from the sea floor, heavily eroded yet hauntingly geometric. Mainstream science suggests natural formation. Others argue for a civilization lost during the rapid sea level rise at the end of the last ice age. And the legends of Ryugu-jo, the dragon palace beneath the sea, linger. The Basques, the Sumerians, the Berbers, all hold linguistic and mythological fragments that seem unlearned from their surroundings. Unique root languages, advanced knowledge of celestial patterns, and stories of floods, not one flood, but the flood. These are not isolated tales. They are refrains from a common song, scattered across time and tongue. What if the survivors of Atlantis, whatever its name truly was, did not disappear, but became the architects of the next age? What if Göbekli Tepe was not the first civilization, but the refuge of the last? Some theorists speak of disaster anthropology, the idea that civilization has cycled multiple times, rising to great heights only to be shattered by cataclysm. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, once fringe, now gains traction. A comet or asteroid impact around 12,800 years ago that may have triggered global fires, rapid cooling, and mass extinctions. Meltwater pulses from collapsing ice sheets would have drowned coastal cities, washing away the evidence beneath layers of silt and salt. Imagine a people watching their horizon vanish, cities turned into reefs, libraries into coral. They would not wait to die. They would scatter. They would take what they could, tools, stories, seeds, stars, and they would begin again. But beginning again is not clean. Over generations, the why becomes legend. The how becomes ritual. The knowledge becomes sacred, then secret, then forgotten. And yet, in architecture and astronomy, language and lore, the fingerprints remain. Shared symbols, spirals, serpents, stepped pyramids, found in disconnected cultures across oceans. Aligned cities and temples pointing to Sirius, Orion, the Pleiades. A reverence for the stars not just as gods, but as destinations. The sense that we came from the sea, but not by chance. The ones who fled the sea did not survive unscarred. They left behind riddles in stone, ciphers in myth, and a question still unanswered. Why did they run? Some say they fled a natural disaster. Others whisper of a war, of technologies we do not understand, of forces unleashed by pride or desperation. A final gamble by a dying empire. But perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps they foresaw the collapse and chose not to preserve themselves, but to preserve the chance that someone, someday, would remember. That someone like you, lying beneath the same stars they once charted, would hear this echo and wonder. They were the ones who read the stars not merely to sail the oceans, but to remember. Across windswept plains and sunken archipelagos, in the language of stone and aligned sidelines, the astrocartographers left behind maps that no longer match the geography of our world, but echo something stranger, memory embedded in celestial mechanics. They weren't explorers in the modern sense. These ancients didn't measure for navigation, but for preservation, charting the drift not of tectonic plates, but of stellar houses, long before such words existed. They charted orbits and conjunctions, but also vanishings. Events that restructured the heavens. Cosmic deletions, as if stars themselves could be redacted from the book of night. In deserts across Earth, from the Atacama to the Kalahari, lines stretch from nowhere to nowhere. Etched in salt, in ash, in ochre. Some lead directly to rising points of now forgotten stars. Others match eclipses that last occurred when mammoths still walked. Stone circles and megaliths. Obelisks pointing nowhere, until precession winds back the sky and reveals their once true alignment. Who could need such maps? Who, in our shadowy prehistory, could look so far ahead, or back, that they marked heavens that no longer exist? These weren't navigators of land or sea. They were surveyors of time. But not time as we know it, linear, mechanical. No. They moved in cycles, folds, eddies. Time was a terrain to them, and it had cliffs, tectonic faults, cataracts of forgetfulness, places you had to leap across, or be lost forever. They mapped these places, not to travel through them, but to leave a breadcrumb trail for those who might someday remember. There are tablets, buried deep beneath sediment and coral, inscribed with star patterns that no longer match the sky above. Scholars dismiss them as artistic flourishes, errors of primitive knowledge. But what if they are not errors, but eulogies? Imagine a people watching the firmament fracture. Not just meteors, but something far more unsettling, constellations unweaving, celestial rhythms breaking step. A star that once pulsed like a heart in the night simply gone. Not exploded, not collapsed, just absent. Its gravitational echo lingering like a phantom. Wouldn't you try to remember? Wouldn't you carve its coordinates into stone so that no one would forget what once lived there? These astronomer historians, these astrocartographers, weren't merely preserving science. They were archiving loss. Not planetary loss, but cosmic mourning. The kind only felt by those whose knowledge spans epochs. In Himalayan caverns, certain alignments of holes in ceilings and rock crevices reveal not stars, but voids, places the sky should gleam and doesn't. These, dead sight lines, as some have come to call them, show us where light used to be. They may have mapped things we are not equipped to see. Shifts in gravitational topology, fractures in space-time, events not just in the sky but behind it. Imagine looking at a wall of water and suddenly seeing it ripple from the other side. That's what their calendars may have chronicled, not the moon's face, but the face of reality, warping. And through it all, they encoded warning. A glyph not unlike a spiral, carved again and again, from the Andes to Anatolia, always spiraling counter to the Earth's rotation. As if to say, beware what spins backward. beware the places where time slips its moorings. There are fragments in Mesopotamian tablets describing islands of the second moon, and in the Codex Dantala of pre-dynastic Egypt, there's reference to skywalkers who perished by remembering. Poetic metaphors? Perhaps. But when multiple vanished civilizations use the same metaphors, something heavier stirs beneath the surface. Modern satellite scans reveal impossible subterranean shapes beneath ice shelves and rainforests. Giant rings, octagonal depressions, cavities aligned to constellations that no longer exist. Some believe they were temples. Others, launch sites. But the astral cartographers may have intended them as something simpler and stranger, planetary bookmarks. Anchors in the slipstream of time, lest we lose our way entirely. Their legacy may not be in what they saw, but what they tried to keep us from forgetting. There are tablets, buried deep beneath sediment and coral, inscribed with star patterns that no longer match the sky above. Scholars dismiss them as artistic flourishes, errors of primitive knowledge. But what if they are not errors, but eulogies? Imagine a people watching the firmament fracture. Not just meteors, but something far more unsettling, constellations unweaving, celestial rhythms breaking step. A star that once pulsed like a heart in the night simply gone. Not exploded, not collapsed, just absent. Its gravitational echo lingering like a phantom. Wouldn't you try to remember? Wouldn't you carve its coordinates into stone so that no one would forget what once lived there? These astronomer historians, these astrocartographers, weren't merely preserving science. They were archiving loss. Not planetary loss, but cosmic mourning. The kind only felt by those whose knowledge spans epochs. In Himalayan caverns, certain alignments of holes in ceilings and rock crevices reveal not stars, but voids, places the sky should gleam and doesn't. These, dead sight lines, as some have come to call them, show us where light used to be. They may have mapped things we are not equipped to see. Shifts in gravitational topology, fractures in space-time, events not just in the sky but behind it. Imagine looking at a wall of water and suddenly seeing it ripple from the other side. That's what their calendars may have chronicled, not the moon's face, but the face of reality, warping. And through it all, they encoded warning. A glyph not unlike a spiral, carved again and again, from the Andes to Anatolia, always spiraling counter to the Earth's rotation. As if to say, beware what spins backward. Beware the places where time slips its moorings. There are fragments in Mesopotamian tablets describing islands of the second moon, and in the Codex Dantala of pre-dynastic Egypt, there's reference to skywalkers who perished by remembering. Poetic metaphors? Perhaps. But when multiple vanished civilizations use the same metaphors, something heavier stirs beneath the surface. Modern satellite scans reveal impossible subterranean shapes beneath ice shelves and rainforests. Giant rings, octagonal depressions, cavities aligned to constellations that no longer exist. Some believe they were temples. Others, launch sites. But the astrocartographers may have intended them as something simpler and stranger, planetary bookmarks. Anchors in the slipstream of time, lest we lose our way entirely. Their legacy may not be in what they saw, but what they tried to keep us from forgetting. Now let us slow. Let the journey settle behind your eyes, like starlight folding into dusk. Let the rhythms of what you've heard drift gently into the dark edges of your thoughts. Not conclusions, but contours. Not answers, but echoes. You have walked beside shadows tonight. Not shadows cast by absence, but shadows of presence. Quiet, strange, and unacknowledged. Forms that may share this earth with us. Beneath the moss. Beyond the cells. between the frequencies of light we know, in the hush of your breath. Can you feel them? The life that metabolizes arsenic in still lakes, that walks mirrored spirals in molecular reflection, that endures heat unlivable and pressure unspeakable, the forms that may drift through acid skies, or hibernate in the marrow of stone. Their heartbeat an atomic tremor. They were never far. Perhaps they were never separate. Only our gaze, structured by habit, blinded by symmetry, filtered through expectation, has kept us from seeing. The shadow biosphere is not an enemy. It is a mirror, a quiet question, a suggestion that life is not a singular script, but an anthology of possibility. That biology is not an answer, but a conversation. And we are only just learning the first phrases. We are carbon. We breathe oxygen. We spiral left. But we are not the only song the earth could sing. Perhaps life arose more than once. Many times. And many lineages faltered. Or wandered down chemical paths that made them invisible to the branches we followed. And yet somewhere, a filament glows. A droplet divides. A thread of plasma dances in the shadow of fire. Perhaps in our instruments, our fields, our sleep. They still wait, not to be discovered, but to be understood. This is not merely a journey of science. It is one of humility, to accept that what we call life is a definition sculpted by convenience, and that the cosmos, in its vastness, need not conform to our language. The moon reflects sunlight, but it has always held its own secrets. So too does the earth, and the blood within us, and the air between our hands. Let this final breath settle like dust. In it are microbes no microscope has named, crystals whose patterns encode a slower story, possibilities that do not demand attention, only patience. Sleep now, wrapped in the infinite quiet of a world more alive than we know, where forests of silicon bloom beneath heat, and the smallest grain of soil may carry a civilization, where clouds may whisper thoughts, and dust may dream, where you, a bearer of questions, have become a listener, not to what is loud, but to what endures. In the stillness, the biosphere is vast. Its shadows are not empty, and the silence between worlds is filled with life, still waiting to be named. Good night.